for me?
Sure. My name is Dennis Tyler. Dennis is Dennis, Tyler, Tyler.
Great. Now we'll actually start the interview. So, tell me your name and where you're from and your state position.
My name is Dennis Tyler. I'm from Muncie, Indiana, and I'm a state representative that represents House District 34, which entails about 85% of the city of Muncie and one precinct in Hamilton Township here in Delaware County.
Okay. Tell me, Dennis, because this documentary started from at BorgWarner closing. Your father worked there. Tell me a little bit about, give me the background of growing up here in Muncie, and your father worked at this BorgWarner factory, which was a prestigious job here to have, and a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. My father worked at BorgWarner, excuse me, for 30 years. Was always involved in BorgWarner and in their labor activities and that. It was a different era of growing up. We had jobs almost on every corner with 3 BorgWarner plants, Chevrolet Muncie, Delco, Acme Lee, we had Indiana Bridge, we had steel companies, we had wire mills. It was a different era in our community. I was very fortunate as I was growing up, and I graduated from Muncie Central High School. When I graduated, there was almost a job on every corner. Didn't make any difference where you went, there was a job available. And they were very good paying jobs. And at that time, coming out of high school and going into some of those types of jobs that were that well paying was just a tremendous opportunity for our community.
Did you start, when you graduated high school, did you start working in any of these factories, or what did you do right after high school?
My father encouraged me to do what I thought was best for myself and my future. He talked to me about going to work at BorgWarner. My father and all of his brothers had worked at BorgWarner, and I tried it for a couple weeks, and honestly, I just didn't like not the atmosphere, but the confinement of being in a plant and in a factory. And tried a couple other things in factories, and just wasn't quite what I had looked for. So when the opportunity came forward for me to apply for the Muncie Fire Department and become part of their first Merit Commission training school, I jumped at that opportunity, and I was fortunate enough to be hired.
When did you start with the firefighters? When was that?
I started with the Muncie Fire Department March 15th of 1965. I worked there for 42 and a half years. As a matter of fact, when I retired, I had the longest tenure in the history of the Muncie Fire Department.
How many firefighters were there when you started, and how many when you ended?
We started, when I hired on, we probably started with right around 125 to 130 firefighters. We went up to, I believe at one time, 135, and was preparing to hire 2 more. And then the downturn started, and when I left, we was down to about 110 firefighters, and that was in 2007. And of course, they've declined quite a bit since then.
Are these all full-time or just volunteer?
All full-time.
Okay.
Everything was full-time, and when I worked for the fire department, we also serviced and provided the fire protection for the entire Center Township.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about growing up.
Excuse me.
And your dad was, you said, a big part of the labor movement and stuff
Yes.
like that. And, did you go to any of the Christmas parties or picnics or any of the stuff that the local had?
I was very lucky. My dad, along with my mother, took myself and my 2 brothers to all those types of functions that they had. They had Christmas parties, they had picnics, and they had union meetings that sometimes we were allowed to attend. I can remember attending one union meeting at the Muncie Fieldhouse, and it was packed. And I don't know how many thousands of people was there, but it was just packed. And in the same way with their summer picnics and their Christmas parties, they were just a huge coming together, and they did so many things like that. And then their United Way participation and their participation in the community, and that they all participated in that. And when they participated in it, their families participated in it.
Okay. Was that kind of seen as this subculture within Muncie that people belong to at all? Did it identify you in the community?
I believe it back in the day that it was an honor, yes, to not only work there, but also if you was a elected office holder in the different unions within the UAW and the building trades and others. It was always an honor to be one of them, and it kind of set you out and apart from the rest of your brothers and sisters that worked in the plants. And it brought a lot of prestige to doing that. And then in doing that, there was a lot of responsibility. They were required to serve on different charitable organization boards and serve as board members on boards such as the United Way and other organizations like that. And they prided themselves in doing that.
Now, the firefighters are part of a union as well.
Yes, the International Association of Firefighters.
Okay. Tell me how after you finished and retired being a firefighter, how you got into politics.
I actually got into politics when I was very young. When I first hired on in the fire department, I was the second youngest person to ever be hired on the Muncie Fire Department. And I was very young and very naive and honestly didn't think that politics meant anything in my life. And after about 4 or 5 years, it became very clear to me in talking to my father that I either needed to get involved in politics or just sit on the sidelines and stay quiet and take whatever comes along. So I got involved at a very early young age in the political process and also as a member of my union, and stayed active in my union as a vice president, as treasurer, as a trustee, president 3 different times for a total of about 12 years, and loved every minute of it. And it was very important. And the political side of it had a lot to do with what went on within the union and how we got things done, the same as it did in the private sector. Whether we like it or not, and whether we want to admit it or not, politics plays such a huge role in our life, whether it's in the public sector or private sector, every day. And I think what you see going on in Washington right now with the debate on health care reform and other issues, that those are all political decisions that are being made by elected officials, and it plays a huge part in our daily lives. And so I got involved very early and stayed involved and worked my way up through the process in the politics, to being a vice precinct committeeman, to a precinct committeeman, being part of the leadership in the Democrat Party and their leadership. Then was elected as the Democrat Party chairman in 1999. Served there till December of 2005, when I was elected in a caucus to fill the role of Tiny Adams, who had passed away in December with a stroke, and having the law to have to fill that position within 30 days. We did that in December of 2005, and I've served in the General Assembly since then.
Okay. Tell me, we'll get into a little bit about, talking about the decline of the industrial jobs in this area, in Anderson and Indiana as a whole. And we've been interviewing a lot of people from BorgWarner talking about when they saw things happening, lines like the Marine line moving out of there, and the 06 vote to not open the contracts. And some of the things we've been hearing is even guys who are strong union guys were like they made wrong decisions, or sometimes the union supported people who maybe shouldn't have been supported, whether it was protecting somebody on the job who was drinking, we've heard, and stuff like that. So the overall question is, do you think, unionism today is on a decline? And some people say that, it was, some people are trying to really push the unions out of this country. And getting to that, I guess, core question of how do you think they have affected the course of manufacturing and the decisions that are being made with closing plants and stuff like that, and plants being opened in the South, because we know the South is not as pro-union as the North. There used to be an old saying that companies wouldn't move above I-70.
Yeah.
So the general question would be, I think unions played a part in this current manufacturing climate because of whatever these reasons you may think of.
Yeah, I think unions have always played an integral part in not just the manufacturing sector of our community and our state and our nation, but throughout the industry side of what we do, whether it's building trades or moving trucks over the roads or the manufacturing in that. And I'm sure if we would go back and look, that there's times that unions knew they made mistakes. And I mean, they're human beings that are elected to offices just like elected officials are, that make mistakes. And of course, in saying that also, as we well know, the CEOs and that and what we've seen over the last 25 years have made huge mistakes in adding to the decline of this country. And I'm not so sure that some of their mistakes weren't entirely orchestrated and purposeful in what they were doing. But in saying that, we could always look back and try to point fingers in that and who's really to blame and who's not to blame. What I always found out in being a union member and even in the public sector, and it's very clear in public law and state law here in the state of Indiana, that a collective bargaining agreement cannot put a community into deficit spending. So regardless of what happens, it has to be a communications across the table with two people or a group of people from each side sitting down and coming to good faith negotiations and trying to realize something that can work for everybody and make everybody a win. And I think it's the same way in the private sector. Everybody wants to point their fingers that so much that's happened has been the union's fault, but yet there's never been a contract that a union has negotiated that the business side of it and them didn't sign off on. And so they must have thought that they could deal with it and handle it. I know as back as in the early 80s with my father at that time, Local 287 and that out there was starting to make concessions and different things. And a good example is what just happened with this plant closing here with BorgWarner. BorgWarner is still a Fortune 500 company. The BorgWarner plant out there on Kilgore was one of their top rated manufacturing plants in the world, not just in the nation, but in the world. So, and those people out there probably give up $15 worth of wages in the last 10 to 15 years to try and help the company, and yet none of that mattered at the end of the day. It's I don't know how to address the issue my dad always told me when you start pointing your finger that you need to look, because you're going to probably have at least 2 or 3 fingers pointing back at you, and I don't like to hear people say, well, it's all the union's fault. Of course they make mistakes, but it's part of our nature as Americans in that, we have more freedoms in that than other countries do in the way that we allow things to happen. I can remember one time when I was president of the union and I was sitting down with 3 of our newly hired firefighters, and they were ridiculing some of the things that we had in our union handbook that we had negotiated. And one of them was laughing at the clause that we had in there for bulletin board space. And I asked him if he had any idea why we had that in there. And he said, no, but it looks silly to me. And I said, I can tell you why. Because at one time, we were not allowed to post anything in the fire stations. We couldn't post a notice of a union meeting. We couldn't post a notice of a picnic. We couldn't post anything. That's why we negotiated bulletin board space, simply so we could have a way to communicate. And what might look silly to one, at the end of the day may not be silly looking at somebody else. And when you start addressing issues with people that are making mistakes that are in the union, there is a disciplinary method put in place. But the tough part about it is that you try to treat everybody equal and you try to do that in the agreement to where everybody is being treated equal. And that don't always work out that way. But yet that's much better than, to me, being an employee at will in a state like Indiana, if you're not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, that unless your civil rights are violated or that, then you are an employee at will. They can terminate you at any time of the day for any reason. And I don't think that's right. I believe that everybody should have a seat at the table and a way to sit down in a very diplomatic manner and try to work out what's best for everybody. What's best for the company should and always should be also what's best for the employee and the employee's family, to have a good quality of life. And and over the last 15 years, we've seen executive wages go up 200, 250% at the same time that the employees' wages have remained stagnant. So there hasn't been as much of a balance as some people have said. And I've always felt that our product is as good as anybody's in the world. Yeah. It doesn't make any difference what it is. I think our product is as good as anybody's in the world. The toughest part about it is, to me, is here in the United States, where we have negotiated decent living wage contracts for our employees. We've built in pensions, an opportunity to retire with a decent quality of life, health care packages to where they don't have to worry about their families if they get sick or they get injured and those types of things. Most of those foreign auto manufacturers have nothing even close to that. So it is almost impossible to compete at that part of the level. And I think all of that has added to some of the decline of what we've seen, and the deindustrialization, as we've talked about before. It looks to me like a lot of that and locating offshore and relocating offshore and locating overseas is a way to continue to drive down wages. And if you look, our wages have declined over the years. Our opportunity to have a living wage has declined dramatically over the last 10 years. And all of those things, I think, are you're seeing now are coming back and are having a huge impact on our economy and a lot of this recession that we're in.
Good answer. Tell me, do you think, I can't remember the name of the bill, federal bill that was coming up this September, for anyone to be able to organize labor?
The Employee Free Choice Act.
Yeah.
Great bill.
Is that dead?
No. I look for it to probably pass, and I hope it does. I think that it's probably the only true chance that middle-class America has to survive. I think, as you've seen, whether people like it or not, as you've seen organized labor decline, you've seen middle-class America decline. And I think that it's a tremendous opportunity for people to have a say again in the workplace. And I think that that's extremely important. I don't think it gives them anything other than that, but it gives them a way to very freely choose to organize if they choose to, with no intimidation and no retaliation. And I think that it will pass, and if it does, I think it will be good for this country.
Tell me, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned it already, influence the unions had on politics here, locally, maybe even at state level, national. I mean, we always hear when candidates are running for president, who the UAW is going to get behind, who the Teamsters are going to get behind. So I guess we'll start here in Muncie.
Sure.
What it meant for local 287 and some of these other unions that 287 isn't here anymore. What that meant for your father, and to have, was there any influence, and things that the union could work with local politicians to make the community more friendly for their way of life, stuff like that, and then we'll broaden out.
Sure, I think unions have always had a role in politics, just like the local Chamber of Commerce, the State Chamber of Commerce, the National Chamber of Commerce, the Manufacturers Association, healthcare industry, doctors. I mean, all of them have a role to play because they have a group voting base. Here, I think where the unions played a role over the years was there was a large voting base, and they voted. I mean, they voted. They voted in their primary elections, and they voted in their national elections in the fall. I mean, they voted, and that means something to office holders. And what I watched over the years was the unions work with management to help secure tax abatements and other incentives for the businesses to be able to profit and prosper at the same time that it worked well for them because it kept jobs. And it always meant something over the years, back in the day, to be endorsed by Local 287 or Local 499 or 489 or 662 or whatever the local was. It meant something because it was a large voting base. No different though than what the chamber would do when they would send out, notifications to their membership that, we need you to vote for this person, and this person, and here's why. The union would do exactly the same thing. We need you to vote for a Dennis Tyler, or we need you to vote for John Doe, or whoever that person is, because he does support your issues, and he believes in a working man and woman having some rights. So it does play a role.
How's it feel now since a lot of them are gone?
I miss them. I mean, many of them were my friends. I still attend the retirees meetings every chance I get to every month, and you go out there and you look at those retirees and you see the fight that they're in for the promise that they had, that they would always have health care. Now that the company's trying to take that away from them as they're deserting this community. But those people still care about the community. At one time in this community, the organized labor, the UAW, the building trades, and all the other unions was the largest donor to the United Way here of Delaware County. I mean, they give hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And every day they gave back to the community at the same time that they did so many other things for the community. And they lived within the community. They didn't commute, they lived here, which strengthened our tax base and give us much larger tax dollars.
Is there climate change within politics now that you're seeing less of this influence?
I think that there's a decline in the influence. However, I believe that people still vote their conscience, and I think they still pay attention, not just on the national level, but on the state level and the local level. I heard a lot of that when I was out at the retirees meeting a week ago last Monday. They still pay attention. They still have communications with each other, and they're not afraid to ask questions. But there has been a decline. I don't know if there's a larger base of independent voters today than there was 20 years ago. I would imagine there is. But those people still pay attention, and they still listen to their international when they send out newsletters and that on what's going on. I still get phone calls from them. I still get emails from them, and I appreciate that.
Okay. Tell me, Ball State has now become the largest employer here in Delaware County. Mm-hmm. That's who would have ever thought that kind of, And with all these factories shutting down, we've talked about the deindustrialization of America and the industrial age as we knew it being over. And we've gone into this information age, and now some of them are saying it's not just about information; it's about information/media age. But also now there's the green industry that people are, even from Washington, are pushing and stuff like that. So having with that background and talking about how we went from BorgWarner, GM, and Indiana Steel, and all these big companies that are gone, to now the biggest employer being Ball State. How does that fit into that perspective, and what do you just think about that?
Well, it's interesting how the employment base has changed in our community, and I can remember, golly Neds, back in the early 80s, my dad telling me that, son, someday Ball State may be the only smokestack left in this community. And when it is, he said that, you're going to see a tremendous change in our community. Well, I thought he was nuts. I did. I just thought he was nuts. I mean, here's a UAW guy with barely a high school education. Now, where's he got this kind of knowledge? But at the end of the day, and what I've learned over the years is my dad was a very intelligent man and knew a lot. And he was right. And it won't be long, I'm not sure Ball State will even have their smokestack left with some of the things that they're doing. But we have tried very hard in the General Assembly in the state of Indiana to transform the state of Indiana. We still love those manufacturing jobs. Any of them that we can attract, we try to. We've created many pieces of legislation to allow local communities as well as the state through the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and others to attract manufacturing industry and bring them back into the state. We welcome them with open arms. But at the same time, we've also worked extremely hard creating new technology legislation for the green jobs and that, and we're beginning to see some of that pay off. We now are very fortunate to have the Bravini Company coming in here into Delaware County. That now looks like they're coming in behind them. Those are jobs that we think are going to be tremendous, very well paying and good living wage jobs, which means a lot to me because they are good living wage jobs. We're seeing Ball State now with a geothermal project that's going to be one of the largest in the world in a public facility. And I think you'll see people coming from all over the world to see exactly what's going on right here at Ball State University in this project. And hopefully it's going to create hundreds and hundreds and maybe a few thousand new jobs in construction and in the building trades. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's going to be thousands of wells that they're going to have to drill here in the area, and what that will do. Those people, when they get that training and what we're doing in creating a training center, and that through a collaboration between Ivy Tech and Ball State and the building trades, is those people, when they get that training and they're done here with that card, they'll be able to go anywhere in the world and work. And you're talking about jobs that'll pay anywhere from $70 to $80 to well over $100,000 a year. And those are darn good paying jobs. So there has been a tremendous transition, and it appears to be working. We hope that it'll continue to work. The technology is moving, as you well know, is changing daily in green jobs and that, and in the IT part of it. We think that Indiana is in a great setting to be very competitive. We're the heart of the Midwest. We think that with what we've done and what we've put in place with the General Assembly and what we've handed back down to the locals, that they can get some things done and create some jobs, and all that will help their tax base.
Good answer. What do you have you heard of the Weed and Seed program?
Yeah, that's the drug program and that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on the Weed and Seed board, but it's one of those boards that I'm honored to serve on. But they were meeting during the General Assembly, and I just haven't had the time to attend them like I would like to. But the Weed and Seed program is a great program to get some money and some programs out into the community.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up, kind of another broader question is, they came to us and were telling us about how they had come across some individuals who they wanted us to kind of be involved in a little bit. And we were telling them about this documentary. And they said, we've seen some guys who used to work at GM, young guys making good salaries and stuff. And when they lost that and they didn't really have anything, they got involved in things they shouldn't do. Got put into the system, and on a small drug charge, went down for a couple of years and got a graduate degree in crime. And now they're coming back and they're trying to get them back to their old identity. And we were kind of interested in that because we said, okay, well, here's a bunch of BorgWarner guys who didn't retire, went from making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, good salaries, and now they not sure what to do and stuff like that. And yesterday I went down to the UAW-CIO where they're teaching their classes, and it's about maybe even less than half the size of this room where they're teaching. And these guys are struggling.
Sure they are.
They went right in, kind of like what you talked about, right out of high school. There was a job on every corner.
Sure.
Some of them may not have finished high school, and they're getting their GED and stuff like that. So it's almost like we have this kind of mess to clean up a little bit. And what are your thoughts on that? And tying that in with what Weed and Seed is, the seed part of Weed and Seed is getting these people back into the community, rather they got in trouble or making sure they don't get in trouble, who went from having a really good middle class living to nothing.
Yeah. When we talk about what has happened to our workers, not just here but across the state and in the nation, but I'd like to stay focused on here, and again, I'll just use my father. Now, Dad probably couldn't have done anything else. What he did out there, I mean, he worked an assembly line, put gears in, with all that oil, move that transmission from one line to the other, come home with oil all over his body. And that, now, if he'd have lost that job, I don't know what he would have done. You know, Dad wanted to work on the railroad and he couldn't. He couldn't pass her physical because he had some spots on his lungs. Now, I don't know how we expect these people to get the motivation and the energy to survive. And here's why I say that is in talking to so many of these people. And I do, and I stay in touch with them, and watching the Financial Institutions Commission hold hearings in the General Assembly on mortgage foreclosures and that. And in the state of Indiana right now, over half of the mortgage foreclosures that we're going through, the employee that has the mortgage foreclosure has either lost his job, had his wages cut, or had his hours cut. And if we don't fix that, they say that 1 in every 37 homes by the end of this year will be in mortgage foreclosure. And all you have to do is pick up the Muncie newspaper and look at that. Now, I don't know how we train these people that are in their 40s, in their 50s, and that, and expect them to be able to go out and compete against younger people that are coming out of college or out of Ivy Tech or Ball State or IU or Purdue or whatever it is. Why would they want to hire them unless they can hire them at a minimum wage? And then how can they survive? We took testimony in the Government and Regulatory Reform Committee down there earlier this year, and then the Labor Committee, from people in this area that were losing their jobs, that within 6 weeks, before they could draw their unemployment, they could be as much as $7,000 in debt. Because not just of the job loss, but trying to pay for their home, their medical bills, their health care, their utility bills, the kids they've got in school. So I don't know how in the world that we can expect these people to be able to survive this disaster. Another good example, as you well know, if you look up in Elkhart County, I think right now they've got the highest unemployment rate in the state of Indiana, the RV industry. Now, you know, those were very good paying jobs, paid $18 to $20 an hour. Very good paying jobs with benefits. The average education for those employees up there was the 8th grade. Now, you tell me what kind of job and what kind of education we're going to get those people that have lost those jobs up there, that they can even go out and make a living wage. And I don't know what government can do, but I'm convinced in being where I'm at and being what I've been involved in for 35 years, government put us in this position in the things that they created in Washington and passed down, in the way that they allowed companies to relocate, giving them tax credits for moving overseas, giving them tax credits for moving offshore, all sorts of incentives to get those good paying jobs out of the state of Indiana and out of this country. We created this mess, and I believe it's up to government that we've got a huge role in fixing it. And to President Obama's credit, I think that he's trying extremely hard with the stimulus and that to get it started. And if we can get it down to the local level, then I think that's critical. But I don't know what to tell these people, and I truly don't. And I'm as involved in it as anybody is. But I can't imagine, and a very good friend of mine was the EAP for BorgWarner until they did away with that position right before they closed it. That poor guy was bombarded 24 hours a day from not just the employee, but maybe a family member, where the employee, you know, is so stressed out that he's done something silly. You know, he didn't want to do something silly, but he did do something silly because he didn't know what to do with himself. You know, you're sitting there, and all at once you were the provider, you were the hero of the family, and now you're worthless. And he said, Dennis, he said it's killing me to have to listen to these stories, get up in the middle of the night, go get somebody out of jail, or go pick them up at the emergency room, and take them home and the different things that are going on, and then have to sit there with them, with their children, and explain to them that, you're not going to have the things that you've had in the past. And we do so many things to almost punish those people and them men and women that I don't know how we expect them to make it. And I don't know how in the world we can say, well, hey, take this computer training and take this and take that, and you're going to be okay, because I don't think they're going to be okay. And I think deep down inside, they know they're not going to be okay, because they don't see the living wage jobs being created that they can do with their hands. And we're not even doing that in school anymore. So, how do we expect them to make it?
Good answer. Since you kind of mentioned it, and I brought it up before our interview, Elkhart County, I'm doing another documentary up there.
Oh, wow. That'll be amazing.
Their unemployment is above 18%.
Yeah.
It's 18.5 right now. And I've talked to one of the heads of the RV company up there for this documentary. And they're talking about, with the electric car engine plant coming up there and eventually putting those in these RVs. And his big thing was the hit from the RV to the RV was credit. People could not get credit.
Yeah.
People who should be able to get credit couldn't get credit.
Yeah, that's true.
And even as manufacturers lost credit,
right?
This last year, it just shut them down.
Right.
And it wasn't so much, he alluded that it wasn't really the gas prices that got him, it was this credit crunch. But what they're doing up there is trying to say, if we go from a gray community, kind of like Muncie is too, they're steeped in this gray industry, BorgWarner and Indiana Steel and gray manufacturing, to green manufacturing. Then companies like Bravini and the other one that's coming up there to build wind turbines, and electric car company, they will come to these communities. And we've talked a little bit about this and said, there's this community that those kind of people are attracted to. They want kind of a small town feel. They want to be able to go to the coffee shops and stuff. And it's, if you're going to build computer chips, you're probably going to go to Silicon Valley.
Sure. Sure.
So how does Muncie try and reinvent themselves? How you talked about plans? We'll start with Muncie and talk about state of Indiana, to start to get out of this.
Yeah. Well, I think the state of Indiana has done a very good job of putting incentives in place that local units of government can acquire and utilize to attract those types of Bravinis and VATs and what we were talking about up in northern Indiana and some of those green job technologies. Excuse me, and everything that I've heard about Bravini and that I've read and about that they're going to be very good living wage jobs. My hope is that even though they're located out there on the corner of 69 and 332, that they're going to be hiring our people here. I think that's extremely important, that they're not importing them from other areas throughout the state, that if we've got an extremely dedicated workforce here and they know how to work with their hands and they know how to get things done, and I think they're willing to learn. I think that's extremely important, and I think Muncie and Delaware County, to their credit, is working extremely hard together to create those types of initiatives. I know that they've used some TIF dollars and other TIF districts to use that to work with that on the lighting program that they will be part of, and I know that Delaware County worked very closely with the state in the incentives and that they put together for Bravini, and I think you see some of that coming to pass right out there with what's going on with 332 and that, and I know that they've and all that with the state and Delaware County. They worked with Norfolk Southern creating another rail spur out there. So I think they're doing everything they can. I think there's much more to do, and I think that as we learn what this technology is and how we expect it to go forward, that's what we'll do, because just 4 or 5 years ago, nobody would have dreamed that a Ball State University could put a geothermal conversion in and hire all of the work and all of the equipment in that right here in the state of Indiana. So, it's changing rapidly, and we're trying to change just as rapidly, and it's tough to keep up. But I think, to everybody's credit, they're working as hard as they can, and from the state, and I think Washington is too. I think they've realized it, and I think that they're, through the stimulus and other things that they're doing in passing down to the state, and then the state passing a lot of that right on to the locals with laws and that gives them the opportunity to do some things. But again, you know, if it's not creating jobs, it's not going to be the success that we need it to be.
I gotta say this because I've heard a lot of people say it. Provini's bringing some jobs in here, and in fact, we've interviewed a couple guys who've already from BorgWarner gone out and applied, had an interview. Those aren't BorgWarner jobs.
No.
They're not going to pay as well. They're not going to have the benefits.
No.
You know. So what's your response when somebody says, "Yeah, it's a wind turbine coming in here, maybe 400 jobs, but they're paying maybe $14 an hour when I was making $24 an hour, not the benefits."
The jobs that we're creating right now don't have the benefits in that we had in the past. Hopefully, though, that they're the stepping stone, that there will be. And I think that's the key. You know, the economy spurs the economy. We create jobs. We create $14 and $15 an hour jobs that begin to give people at least a decent wage to raise a family on. And as they do that, it will bring other businesses and new technology in, and all of that together, if we can get this economy turned around, will begin to raise the wage earners' wages again, and that's got to be the key, because if we're not putting money in homeowners and workers' pockets for them to spend, then businesses can't survive either. I mean, that's the key. They can call it a vicious cycle, and I know people say, well, you know, I'd like to have a $20 an hour job. Well, of course we would. And we'd like to be able to create that $20 an hour job. But the fact of the matter is, right now, I don't see them. But I do see Brevini's and VATS and those that have assured us that those will be living wage jobs that people can begin to build on. And if they are, I believe in that old Kevin Costner comment that if you build it, they will come. And I think if you build it and you build it right, they will come. And if they do, what I'd like to do is I'd like to see some of them coming right back into the heart of Muncie, right back into some of these brown areas that we've got that were plants at one time, and coming right back in and revitalizing our tax base here in our community.
Tell me a little bit
Excuse me.
you can get a drink if you want.
Thanks.
Local politics with our mayor now. There's been a lot of controversy in the news, and some of that has to go around with the firefighters. The population of Muncie has shrunk.
Yeah.
Everybody from state to federal is having to make some sort of cuts in their budget. What do you know? To me, and we've heard comments of people saying, you know, here's all these BorgWarner guys that were just put out of work. And there's this, and we're talking hundreds, and there's this handful of firefighters that are, you know, saying I'm being put out of work.
Yeah.
When, you know, and it's kind of like, I've heard people say, well, do they even almost have a right to complain or something? When there's hundreds of these guys.
Excuse me.
Same wages or better or something like that. Just give me a little bit about your opinion, and that obviously you have one because of your background. Tell me.
Yeah. I think it's a shame, you know, what's happened in our community, the breakdown in communications, I guess for lack of a better word, between the mayor and the firefighters and other organizations altogether. You know, I don't see people working together as they could and they should. You know, it's I understand with the revenue loss and that we've had here. You know, there's got to be tough choices made and tough decisions made. But I, for one, as an elected official that represents this community down at the General Assembly, and I've said it since the first day that I went down there, it's my job to put options and opportunities in place. It's not my job to tell local officials how to do their job. Give them the opportunity, give them the tools, give them the options, and then let them do what they think is best. The biggest breakdown that I've seen, and I think it's from the private sector to the public sector, and that is there's just been a tremendous breakdown in communications. And when that happens, I think you see tensions rise, feelings come to the top, and when that happens, sometimes people say things they shouldn't. They'd love to take them back, but once you say something in a public way, you can never take it back. All you can try to do is move on. And all this is interrelated. And I'll give you a very quick example. Excuse me. When we first implemented what we call the circuit breakers or the tax caps, we did that in 2007. And we did that at 3% across the board for homeowners and commercial properties and everybody. And I had told people as early as 2006 that there was a train wreck coming and that we needed to get prepared for it. And what we had did in 2007 was just a Band-Aid. And I'm sorry to say, but I proved out to be right. But we started before the session even started, after the tax catastrophe in the summer of 2007, where people got tax bills that were going to put them out of their homes, and trying to determine what we needed to do next. And at that time, we was looking at a 3% circuit breaker. Excuse me. Delaware County, the Chamber of Commerce, and the City of Muncie brought, I believe, 2 consulting firms in to discuss the House Bill 1487 that created the circuit breakers and what their impact was going to be here. And I'm sitting there listening, and they talked about the amount of job loss that it may create. And I could never, ever, when this all started in 2006, I couldn't grasp exactly what it was and what we were talking about and exactly what the emotion was and where this was all coming from. But when I got the job loss comment made by the gentleman from Umball and Associates, it kind of struck a bell. And I've always been a numbers guy, and when I was president of the Firefighters Union, I kept everything. I kept what the UAW made, what ASME employees made, or what everybody made, and always tried to build off of that. So I went home, and I got the numbers from in the early 90s on the employees that we had here in the city of Muncie, at Chevrolet and at the BorgWarner plants and Delco and all the others that we had at that time. And I took them numbers to Indianapolis at their current wages and had them run the numbers for me on the tax revenue that would bring into the city of Muncie. And they ran them numbers for me, and what was so astounding was that we went from a $3 million deficit to almost a $5 million surplus just in them employees, an $8 million turnaround. And all at once that light went off in my head. Well, Dennis, that's what this is all about. It's the employees that we're losing, the jobs that we're losing, the wages that we're losing. We're not replacing them with the same types of jobs. That's what is devastating our tax base. And that's what's devastated our tax base here, just those jobs. If we still had those jobs, we would not be in the decline that we're in, but we are. So everybody's got to figure out a way to do it. It's a political nightmare for the elected officials. I fully understand that, just like it's a political nightmare for us. We've got to fix the economy. If we fix the economy, then I think we fix our tax base. And I think that it all plays in. And heck, I can fully understand them BorgWarner people sitting there, or those Chevrolet people that had their doors closed on them in 2006 saying, what the heck do them firefighters got to feel bad about? You know, we've lost our jobs, it's their turn. Well, on the same hand, I'm sure that those firefighters didn't want to see those men and women lose their jobs because they knew what that was going to do to the tax base. I think those firefighters also know that their responsibility back to the community is emergency response and public safety issues. That's extremely important, and they're probably concerned that they will not be able to provide the services that they need to provide. And it's just a catch-22, not only for the for the elected officials, but also for the firefighters, for the police officers, and everybody else that's being impacted by this.
Good answer. It's funny that you brought up, it was in 2006 because that's when BorgWarner announced that they were closing the plant. Do you think that these tax, that you talk about the circuit breakers and stuff like that, had a real role in industry getting out of here?
I don't think that the circuit breakers and the caps had any role in the industries getting out of here. If anything, it would have helped them.
Yeah.
I mean, over the years, I know that city council here and that had given millions of dollars in tax abatements and credits to not just Chevrolet Muncie, but to BorgWarner. And, 2006 was the year that BorgWarner announced their closing. 2006 was also the year that Chevrolet Muncie closed. And I got the phone call the day that, the last day that they were open. And one of my friends asked me to run out there, and my wife and I was getting ready to take her mother and father out of town on vacation. So I run out there, and that plant was always in my territory on the south side of Muncie as a firefighter, and made many calls out there over the years, and would go in there and see hundreds of people working and machines running, and they had their fire crews and everything. And I'll tell you, I walked in there that day and there wasn't a machine left in that place. It was as hollow could be. And it was so hollow, your voices would echo. And there was probably about 12 of those employees there that day, just finishing up. And I'll never forget their faces, never, as long as I live. The tears in some of their eyes. And you could just see, man, what do I do now? And I talked to him for a little bit, and I walked out, and I had a Chevrolet Trailblazer waiting for me to get into when I got out there. And I was walking out, and I was really sad as I was walking out. And by the time I got to my vehicle, I was so mad I was shaking. And what are we doing? And what's going to happen, not to just our community, but to our country when we lose these jobs? And it's all about money. And it's all about who's beholden to the stockholder and who's not. And cause they didn't eliminate the jobs. They eliminated the jobs here. They took the jobs someplace else to where they could do it cheaper. And that's all it was. And now you see those people from Chevrolet, BorgWarner, and other plants that were making quality living wage jobs, taking the jobs that our kids used to take at the McDonald's or the Arby's or the Meijer store or the greeter at Walmart. And I just can't imagine what they're going through in their minds, and it's pretty heartbreaking if you look at what's happening to our community in the last 4 years, and you look at the thousands and thousands of jobs that we've lost due to that, and it's surely been about greed. I guess we can continue to blame it on the unions as long as we live, if we want to. But if people cannot look at the true greed in this, because again, like I said, it's not that the jobs are being eliminated, they've just been transferred. I mean, right after General Motors got their bailout, what they say they was going to do, eliminate 20,000 more jobs here in the United States and create 40,000 more overseas. Well, what a novel idea. Why don't we eliminate those 40,000 jobs overseas and leave those 20,000 jobs here?
That's pretty much all I have. But, there was one topic that came up, and this may be on your plate here someday.
Excuse me.
You can grab a drink.
Okay.
We talked about how many of these homes that are going to be vacant here over the next 10 to 20 years in Muncie. And these are homes that their children aren't going to probably buy.
No.
They're $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 homes.
Yeah.
They're real small World War II homes.
Yeah.
and they're retirees living in them, you know, and their kids have probably left the area, and that's going to be a huge cost. I remember when I was looking at what the mayor of Cleveland was going through last 2 years, millions of dollars to maintain these homes and even tear them down when the foreclosure really started. They got hits. You know, Cleveland was the epicenter of, you know, what the worst example was. But there's also the end of this baby boomer generation that's going to be right behind this whole foreclosure and eviction. So has that come up at all?
It has, and you know, and we've even discussed it in Indianapolis, you know, and through the financial institutions and that, and I think some of that goes back. It's with these mortgage foreclosures and that, and some of the things that went on over the years that you know, people were working, and golly, I can't tell you how many times I used to drive down the street or walk down the street and see, here's a home for sale, we can get you 110% of the assessed value of it. Well, you know, and I'd look at that and I said, well, you know, that don't make a lot of sense. If it's a $100,000 home, we can get you $110,000 on it. Well, eventually that's got to catch up with everybody. And I think that's been a lot of it. And you know, we heard a lot in Indianapolis, well, you know, the home buyer should have known better. Well, okay, let's say that some of the home buyers should have known better. So you're to blame, but what if I've only got a second grade education?
There's some predatory tactics.
Yes, extremely predatory, and we have found that out by different financial institutions. And every time they would get caught, then the government would bail them out. You know, they'd make these huge mistakes. People would lose their homes and that, but the banks and them would get bailed out. And I'm not talking and saying that all banks are bad. Don't misunderstand me. But there has been lending companies that did practice predatory practices, and they used it on people. And you know, now we're finding out that loans were given out to people that even if now they went to through the stimulus plan and had the opportunity to refinance at a much lower interest rate, they may have to pay 4, 5, 6, up to 12 months payments for penalties for paying that loan off and going with a new lending company. Well, now, to me, should be criminal, but it hasn't been. Now, we started implementing some new laws down there and putting some new laws in place to deal with some of that, and but it's going to take time. You know, it's not something you can get done overnight, and some of those lending companies and those industries are extremely powerful.
The equity in people's homes is really kind of like the last holdout. If a lot of people are already getting their wages cut, losing these jobs, that 10 to 20-year equity that they had built up in their homes is the last real holdout financially.
Absolutely.
Is being wiped out.
Absolutely. Here. I have seen from employees out there that had their first mortgage and had their second mortgage, and one had nothing to do with the other. One could be with the John Doe Corporation, and the other one could be with the William Henry Bank. Excuse me. And trying to prepare for the inevitable of their loss of their job, and trying to get their credit and everything in place. And maybe when they bought their home, it was at 7%. Well, they would have the opportunity to refinance that at, say, 4% or 3.5% or 4.25%, which it would be a heck of a savings to them, and they could even maybe refinance it to the point to where they could even pay their second mortgage off. And they would apply to do that, and the first mortgagee would approve it, and everything was okay. The second mortgagee would deny it, so the first mortgagee would not go along with it. And so they're in a catch-22, and they're dead in the water.
That's my point. Going in that direction with this was, you know, we have all these guys who are unemployed now, and they're going to take jobs at. I mean, we talked to one guy who he was the son of a third generation BorgWarner worker.
Mhm.
Now he's working two
Yeah.
jobs. One of them is at Walmart,
Yeah.
and those two jobs don't add up to one BorgWarner
No.
job. So you have people who, it's almost like there's a Katrina economic storm that's still coming.
Sure it is.
With people are going to really lose their homes around here.
Sure it is.
With all these jobs
Sure.
lost.
Sure. If we don't turn this around with living wage jobs, there's going to be a much huger separation between the haves and have-nots, the rich and the poor, and it'll probably completely eliminate middle-class America. And maybe that's what people want. I don't know.
But that'll even affect Ball State.
Well, sure it will.
Almost every
Sure it
person
will.
we talked to who went there, not every, but a lot of them said, I sent my kids to college on this job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to see, whether they like it or not, if we don't turn this around, your college and universities, ordinary kids will not be able to afford to go to a university. They will have to go to your Ivy Techs and your Indiana business colleges and them. They're not going to be able to afford to do that. And then what happens to your universities? How will they be able to continue to offer the quality education, the quality environment in that you have at a university like this? They won't be able to do it. And I talked to people about that earlier this year, and they say, well, you could do this and you could do that with property taxes. And I said, well, look, we could privatize all of our universities too. Save us a lot of money. But how long then would the ordinary average working man be able to put his kid into that university? Not every kid can go to a Notre Dame, or to a private university. And if we don't, how can we sit here and say education is the key, but we make it so expensive that ordinary people can't get that education?
That's all I have. Is there anything you wanted to cover in this interview?
I don't think so. I think you did a heck of a job. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time coming in here.
This is just,
follow up with you again or cross paths.
If you want to, if anything comes up that you need to.
I'll be in correspondence with you, asking what's going on.
It never bothers me to talk about what's going on with this economy and people. I guess maybe it's just a Democrat in me, but it don't bother me a bit.